No brakes, no filters. This is Life is Fast. I'm your host, Steve. Let's dive right in. On tonight's episode, we got a very special guest. His name's Brian Jenkins, and he's one hell of a guy. We're going to get his perspective on a work-life balance tonight. Brian, how you doing?
Wonderful. How you doing this evening?
Doing good, doing good. Man, I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but it's winter, but today apparently it felt like being spring. So it's a good day over here in New Jersey, that's for sure.
I got the same thing in Ohio. We got some blue skies. We got a little bit of warmth. I think it's pushing around 60 degrees. It's melting all the snow that we had from that storm last week. So I'm appreciating that because I don't have to shovel or plow or do any of that.
Yeah, me neither. We didn't get a lot of snow last week, just a little dusting, but enough still that I really needed to clean off. So, I mean, I'm itching for this season to start. But like we talked about before we started, that's going to be a real genuine conversation that we have because I really don't know much about you, so it's going to be good. Let's just start it off with the basics. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and we'll go from there, bud.
Sure. My name's Brian Jenkins. I'm from Champion, Ohio, which is considered Warren, Ohio. We're about an hour south of Cleveland.
Okay.
I'm pretty well located. It takes me an hour to get to Cleveland, or I can shoot over to Pittsburgh, and it takes about the same amount of time to get there. So I'm pretty close to the border of PA, up in the north eastern portion. Not far from the turnpike, actually, if that helps.
Oh, okay.
Triangulate where I'm at.
Yep.
Born and raised in this area, if we're jumping right into it and right off the start, I originally came from street bikes, always been into sports, always been into things that go fast and extreme, we'll say, like adrenaline junkie. At a young age, I was one of the guys that way back before it was cool and before X Games was around, I was riding a freestyle bike and I was riding, alongside the guys that are the pioneers kind of that sport. I got to see a young Matt Hoffman and a Dennis McCoy and Martin Apparejo, Eddie Fiola, all them guys, the guys that were in RAD.
Did you have a chance to meet like Dave Mira?
I did not meet Dave Mira. Dave Mira was a little bit after. I was into it real heavily. He came along a little bit later, although all the greats, a lot of the guys I mentioned were still in the sport and still evolving. And like I said, with the X Games and, Matt Hoffman, he's still breaking all kinds of air records and doing the stuff that he was doing, that was all still evolving and growing exponentially because that really took off. Yeah, but I got out of it a little bit at that point. I played college basketball.
Oh, okay.
So I was a little preoccupied around that time, would have been that era. So I had to pull back out of that a little bit and concentrate on the college aspect. And, those practices are pretty grueling and take up a lot of time. So I didn't have a lot of time to do the fun stuff that I really wanted to back then. But then, like I said, fast forward a bunch of years, I was drag racing cars and doing that and met some guys that had some street bikes, and it kind of ticked me off that I was putting all this money into a car. And then one of my buddies goes down the drag strip on a 600cc bike and just shreds, it was crazy. So I was like, okay, I gotta have one of those. So it kind of turned into back on a two-wheeled bike again, and felt like doing tricks, doing wheelies. And that was about the time of around here anyways, locally, Star Boys became real popular. It was actually friends of ours in this area, so we all rode with those guys. The shenanigans that took place along with that, and which led into how I met Michelle, and pulled her into the street bike scene with me, and that was actually how we ended up getting into off-road, was because I was riding wheelies and I was doing a bunch of crazy stuff. I think I just got like a GSXR 1000, and she says, I'd like to get a bike because that way, you don't have to worry about stuff with me on the back. 'Cause, I wouldn't do anything crazy with her with me because it's not just your life at that point you're risking, as somebody else's. So I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't get crazy with her on the back of the bike. So she was like, if I had one, then you could do your thing and don't have to worry about it. And I said, nah, but if it's getting that serious, then we need to go play where it's a little bit, better odds for us,
Safer.
because the road doesn't really flex and bend to your will much. So
No, I used to do shenanigans and stuff myself, and it was funny. I literally just had this conversation with my kid because I just saw an ad on Facebook for Six Flags over in, I think it's Saudi Arabia, I think is where it is. And there's a new coaster that's apparently the tallest and the fastest in the world, and I don't know if it's legitimate. I have to look it up, but the video said it goes up to 250 kilometers an hour, which that's 155 miles an hour. That is insane when it comes to
right,
speed. Riding bikes, and I know the same thing. You know, fastest I ever went on a bike was my Gixxer 600. It was stock. I don't think I even have a muffler on it, and I did 170 on that thing. I mean,
right,
and people always want to jump right to 1,000, or bigger. And it's like, dude, you can literally just jump on a 600 and still go fast and have fun. Like, you don't need 1,000 plus. When you're getting into the racing, an actual drag racing and stuff, yeah, sure. But just because you want to go fast doesn't mean you have to buy, a huge bike. 70,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
moving. That's hustling. Of course, it was
The,
closed roads, of course. Professional track rider.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's I give you credit for that, because you're telling that story, and I had said that we got out of the street, and that was actually one of the last things I remember was, we're going from our town to a town adjacent,
Mhm.
upscale and big mall, and just cruising. That was where everybody went for a big strip hangout. And on the
Yep.
way there, it's a big wide open road. And of course, everybody, like you said, they got to have the biggest, baddest bikes, the Hayabusas, the,
Mhm.
Cow 1400s at the time,
Yep.
all those. And I remember one of the guys that just got one of the Cowie 1400s, and he come blowing by, and Michelle dug her hands into me to like go. And I remember I rolled on, and I mean, it was immediate. The speed on those it's
Hmm.
so fast. And I
Yeah.
remember I reeled him in, and I passed him, and I looked down, and I think I was only in like fourth gear maybe. But I remember looking down, and I was climbing so fast. I remember seeing like 160, 170, something like that. And I'm like, what am
Hmm.
I doing? And that was it. Like, I
Yep.
literally rolled off, and I never ever cracked on it again on an open street, unless
Yep.
it was a drag strip or a closed course,
Yeah.
because it made me mad. I'm like, what is going on? And I had a wide open road. There was, as far as
Yeah.
safety went, in as many years as I had been riding, there wasn't anything scary there. There was nothing in the way, nothing for miles ahead of me. But
Hmm.
when the striped lines on the road, your passing lines, are solid, and they're not solid. They're not solid, but it's solid when you look at it.
Yep.
That you're just. And so
You're
I was like,
cruising.
that's it. That's not happening again. I'm done. That was my wake up. I
Mhm.
just said, no, it's time to put this up for sale and buy a few machines that we can go and trail ride and have a good time. Because it was funny, the transition from the street, it all happened in a weird way, because I worked at a Kmart Sears distribution center,
Oh, jeez.
and I was
We're
getting
going
laid
back.
off. Yeah, we're going way back. So I was actually getting laid off for the winter,
Okay.
and they had never done that before. They were like, we were always so busy, and they're like, okay, we're gonna lay off, 50 people or whatever it was. And happened to be that I was one of the top ones, the last ones that they were like, we'll call you back, as soon as we need you, but you're probably going to be off at least a month. And it was right around Christmas. And I remember thinking, this is a perfect time, let's go buy some machines and we'll go trail ride. And, if I don't have to be at work, I got 24/7 to go ride.
Yep.
And bought a 400 EX, and we rode that thing, and we knew nothing about motocross, we knew nothing about anything in that world yet. We just knew four wheelers and go ride and have a good time and sling some mud and
Yep.
whatever, and yeah, we rode that for quite a while that winter. And it was funny, there was a local organization at the time that we found out about that was huge, called Competition Riders of America, CRA organization, over in this area. My Michelle, she at the time would have just been my girlfriend, but she was a cop for one of the local districts in the area.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. She was actually a Brookfield Township police officer.
Okay.
And it was funny because they asked to use her four-wheeler for a sting operation. And when they, and so like, I'm like, don't let them take this, our 400, we're having too much fun with that, right? One of the kids from the school seen it and then approached her later. She worked basketball games and did stuff. And so
Hmm.
since he seen it, he came up and asked her, was like, hey, since you and your boyfriend got a four-wheeler, would you want to come check out this track? A bunch of us go and blah blah blah. How that goes, word of mouth. And so
Hmm.
she asked me about it, and I said, I think I had to work. It was during the week, and I said, no, go check it out, see what it's all about. And then I'm off all weekend long. If we like it, or you say it's worth it, we'll go check it out. Well, of course, you know how things are meant to be. A lot of
Hmm.
times things just fall in place. So
Yeah.
I load everything up for her. I have it all ready to go. I go to work. She goes. I get home and she's waiting up for me. She can't wait to tell me everything about it. And of all things to have happen, and like, now we know nothing about the sport. We know nobody, she
Hmm.
shows up, she comes home, she has all these pictures, and you know, she printed these out and stuff. Tim Farr, of all people,
Oh, really?
was at the track practicing with Baldwin because it's
Oh,
up
okay.
north. So Baldwin, I guess they were testing something at the time. And so she got to meet Tim Farr and see what an actual pro motocross ATV
Nice.
rider was capable of, being the first time at a motocross track that, we knew what dirt bike motocross was, but we had no
Mhm.
idea about the ATV side or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was her first experience, and she just lit up. She was so excited. It was pretty wild. And then I got to, obviously, it hyped me out of my mind. And I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
we're going back to check this out.
Hell yeah.
And it's so funny. So we go back that weekend and we got to ride, we got to practice, and we took, our friends that were kind of in the same boat as us, same thing. They went and they loved it as well. So it was just really cool, the experience and the way it came to be. And then that was the beginning of that whole era, was kind of how that worked out. It was kind of interesting and neat, that backstory.
Yeah, that's a hell of a first time going out like that for a track. I mean, to meet those guys, that's awesome. I'm kind of like you. I knew about Supercross with the bikes. I really didn't know anything about the ATV side either myself until I really got into, being a photographer for our local D6 series. Let me tell you, when I was at the first pro series race out in Pleasure Valley, to see Joel and Chad and Nick and all those guys running, it was mind blowing. I could not believe the skill level from watching, my normal riders of these to watching the pros just throwing down. I was like, holy crap. Like, wow, this is impressive. And to even think when I went to Bud's Creek, like that was one track I really wanted to go to, famous for Supercross. Wow. When I was there and walked up to what's the, finish line, and I just stood there and I looked all around. I was like, holy crap. I'm at Bud's Creek. Like, this is huge. The elevation, these everything, like, TV does not do it justice, you know? Like, that was a
Yeah.
crazy first time for me, so I can only imagine, meeting somebody like Tim Baldwin back then, just random at a local spot. Like, that's gotta be awesome for sure.
And you know what was really interesting and cool in a way that would be hard to describe now to a lot of people. Maybe not as bad, because some people got to experience something really cool when Briarcliff had their Legends race and
Mhm.
everybody came back, and that was a whole different atmosphere. And if you got to experience that and you felt that, there's just a
Mm.
presence. There's a just this huge presence, that overcomes that entire area when all of that is going on, and there's just so much greatness in one spot. Back in that period, back in that time, you know so we would have been checking things out around 2002, and then 2003 would have been when we started dabbling locally. to race and stuff. And it's wild to think that even a local series that wasn't even like an AMA sanctioned race or anything like that. So you had your Pima Tuning Whole Shots, your Malvern Motocross, Amherst Metal Arts. I'm throwing out a bunch of names of tracks that would have been a local series, smaller, so to speak.
Hmm.
But these were races that we didn't know it at the time because we didn't know the circuit. But it was crazy that Tim Farr would show up to a local race, and it was nothing. Jason Luberg, Angela Moore, there was these greats, there was these people that would go on, Josh Upperman, Mark Kendall. I mean, I could go on and on from all the local people from back in the day that ended up being, they were huge names in the sport for a while and then carried on. John Natale.
Yep.
John Natale was at a bunch of our local races, and it just blows my mind. Jason Dunkelberger, he
Mhm.
would be one that would be over here. That was crazy that, we would see these people and, so we got to see them race too on a track that was probably too narrow, that was probably not ideal for them. But,
Mhm.
these guys are the best of the best, and they're going out there and just throwing it down. They're
Yeah.
shredding, they're ripping, they're riding the tracks the way they were meant to be. And, like you said, you go and you see what you're used to with like your locals and whatnot. Not that we had any slouches locally, like we had some phenomenal riders.
Yeah.
But then when those guys showed up and the bar was raised even higher, and
Mhm.
you seen the speed and the sheer talent and skill, you're like, I didn't know any of this was possible. Like, this
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
blows my mind that I've never seen anybody do that with a four wheeler, go that fast, because the dirt bikes, we would race and take turns on the track is
Hmm.
how it happened locally. So excuse me, we were all there together,
Hmm.
and nobody complained, nobody really brought that up back in that time period, that we just switched back and forth. And the faster the guys were on dirt bikes, actually, the more they liked it, it seemed like, because it kind of kept the track manageable. And they said that, it wasn't easy because a lot of the guys that maybe weren't their speed, they could just stick their tires in a rut and be faster than they should have been.
Yeah.
Whereas if they had to navigate a couple of the turns and, we flatten some things out or take certain ruts away, whatever, they liked that because then the skill, rose to the top easier.
Yeah.
But that was interesting, yeah, back in the day, that to see that. And I don't want to say we were spoiled, but we were subjected to it a lot more than we would have been if we were from any other area, any other place. I got to see a young Joel Hetrick riding, back when he was on these and whatnot. Before
Okay.
he was Joel Hetrick, he was out there ripping around on a little bike and stuff. So, I had guys that like Billy Cottage and the Ogram brothers. And, there was a crew from up north that, hung out in the Baldwin camp that would come down and ride and stuff. So I got to see like the up and comers and all that. And it was just, for us, it was normal.
Yeah. Yeah, that is it's something that you can cherish forever, I mean, it's even for me, first time meeting a celebrity, and it wasn't even in race, community. It was up in New York City, and it was, what's his name? Adam Carolla, and I think he was
Oh,
probably the
okay.
first celebrity that I actually saw when I was out and about. I used to actually deliver high-end cars, Lambos, Ferraris, all that for a rental company. We actually did racetrack events too, but I delivered to New York almost every day. And I remembered I was sitting in a hotel waiting for my client to come pick up the car or return it, whichever. And I happened to look over and I'm like, holy crap, that's Adam Carolla. I was like mind blown. Like I'm just in some random hotel in the middle of Manhattan, and all of a sudden you got a celebrity. So, I mean, it's happened a few times, and even going to some concerts and being able to meet some people, like that's something you'll never forget. No matter how old you are, that's something you don't forget, and it's something that means a lot. Whether it's a celebrity or a sports figure, or even just somebody, and like at the race, it's just even the pro am class, that you look
Hmm.
up to and admire. Like that's something really cool to be able to take with you and even pass along to your kids one day too. Take them to a race and you tell them, look, this is the best racer in the world. he knows my name,
Right.
you know, like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
something that they can take with them too, you know, like, it's really cool, you know, I've had a lot of fun already. It's only been a few years, but, I mean, it's just I've had so many good times. I'm looking forward to this 2026 season, you know, especially with so many of these pros retiring. You know, you got Janusa retired, you got, Rastrelli retired, Chad retired, like, the 2026 season with these pros is gonna be crazy. I cannot wait to see who steps up. You've got Tyler Marlin, he'll be running his 2nd full year with the pro class. You have Heath Hanna that I'll hopefully be speaking with soon for an episode. He's running pro class this season. This will be his debut for 2026. We also have
Cool.
Damian Hubert is going to make his pro debut for 2026. Like it's going to be crazy. Just like Supercross. Supercross A1 starts this weekend, baby. I can't wait for that gate to drop. You know, with all these team changes with, you know, Eli and Sexton and Jason Anderson, all these guys switching teams, it's going to be a hell of a season. I cannot wait for this season. You know, it's going to be so good. I'm getting to more tracks this season. You know, I'm going to be out in Briarcliff. I'm going to go to Baja Acres. You know, and I'll be at Bud's Creek again. I can't wait. It's going to be so badass. I can't wait to see who steps it up this season. I really think Bryce Ford has a really good shot of taking Joel this season. If he can get some good starts, you know, he was dominating that 2nd position last year and really, you know, giving Joel a run for his money. So I'm interested to see how he does this season for sure. But, you know, even just watching the races and not being as involved of us, again, just meeting somebody on that level, it's just something that you take with you and you'll never forget. It means a lot. You know, it's just like you said at the Legends race, there's a presence about it when somebody like that is there and you feel it. And it's exactly that was the best way to describe it. You feel the presence of greatness, even if you're not talking to the person and they're just, you know, out and about, you know, walking through the pits or whatever. There's that presence and you feel it. And it's
Yeah.
unlike anything else for sure. Kind of like riding bikes, you know, going fast, doing shenanigan stuff. Like there's no other feeling like that, you know? So, you know, it's just another form of adrenaline.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. And I'm excited for this season as well. There's a lot of things, a lot of factors that are gonna, I guess, have a big impact. And I'm waiting for some things to come out because as a rider and as a fan, there's a lot of things that haven't been shared yet, I feel like.
Mm,
You mentioned Bryce. I hope Bryce is on the starting line this year. Bryce is one of those unique individuals that has a lot of options available to him that he could, take his talents to trophy trucks and try different things. Lucas Oil, I'm sure he's got a bunch of options there.
yep.
And let's face it, the biggest downfall or the biggest negative with the ATV racing in general is just that the powers that be don't promote it and don't try and
Hmm.
bring it to its full potential of what is possible. And
Yes.
because of that, there's not a lot to be gained from it. And I hate to say that because I don't want to be negative. I mean, I love the sport and I've done it, for many years and been involved for a long time. And, obviously as amateurs, we're not making any money. We're not getting anything out of it. But I would love for the pros and the pro-am guys and the WMX girls to be able to get enough out of it that they, at least stick with it and are able to ride and do a lot more than what right now. If you don't have certain sponsors or a family that is either independently wealthy or somebody within the family that supports you in a big way, it's really difficult to not just have the correct machinery but to have a program in place that allows you to get like a work-life balance if you have to, unless you're Joel. And I'm not even sure there's anybody else that has the ability to ride as their job. And it makes it a struggle for all of us because I just came back from Deckers. I had shared with you briefly. I got to see Heath ride and a couple of the other guys. Joel ended up popping in there,
Hmm.
so I got to see some of the guys riding and training and putting in some time and effort already for the season. And
Yeah.
that's a huge plus for anybody to be able to get away and do some outdoor riding in the off season, because I know normally I don't get to. I'm lucky to get to one of the indoor tracks that the Arnalds will go and rent so that us quads can get together and go and have a couple days, that we get a couple hours here and there that we get to go ride a place called
Hmm.
Ram Jam. But yeah, we don't have a lot of options because normally the weather doesn't cooperate.
Yeah.
And if the weather does cooperate, the tracks, nobody's looking to really open. Our best option for outside is over there at Breezewood Proving Grounds.
Okay. Yep.
Us Northerners will say over
Yeah.
there in
Yep.
Pennsylvania. So, that's very limited. And, I don't think Dan's opening up till like March at best. So, yeah,
Yeah.
we're
Something like
we're hanging on by a thread at this point, for training and trying to ride and do all the things that you'd like to do in the off season. So unless you can get down south or you're a southerner to begin with, that you've got the weather and you've got tracks that you can go to and ride on, which I'm real thankful for Deckers being down there where it's at and that family providing some place to go. That was just awesome. That the weekend between Christmas and New Year to be able to get down there, get to see the race family and everybody as well. It's just an awesome getaway. So just kind of gives you the shot in the arm that you need with these winter blues that
oh
you have
god,
up
yeah.
north. So for sure.
It's a withdrawal for sure. Once that season ends, that depression kicks in. It's like, damn. And I've talked about it a little bit, on the other episodes, but for the most part, everybody's tearing engines down, rebuilding, getting plastics, whatever they need, to get the next season. But it's freaking depressing. Like even though the season ends, and like hunting season starts for me, it's still depressing. I wanna be out there at the track, like, there's nothing like it.
Later and go later, because the best weather for riding around here is
Yep,
just starting to take place about the time that we stop riding as far as the
yeah,
series goes. I feel like we should go till, September, October. And
mhm,
instead of trying to start in March when the snow's on the ground in most areas, because I mean, let's face it, it's for the most part an East Coast series, is
mhm,
where the most of the riders are located. And it's just too early a lot of times, I feel like, to get the good kind of weather
yeah,
to be able to race. And, we have perfect weather in August, September normally, and a lot
mhm,
of times even into October. So I feel like for some reason there's a big rush. They always blame it on school and they blame it on this. And I'm like, no matter what, we're going to have the summer months and those are going to be open. And you're always going to run in, to some of those months, either beforehand or afterhand, the
mhm,
fact of when kids are in school or, there's obstacles. But I just feel like we need to go back to maybe like in the old days, we had the North versus South, divide the series up a little bit so that you don't have, what I mean? You don't have to run them all, make it a little bit like what the dirt bikes have it where
yeah,
you can go and hit up a couple tracks and accumulate points and have a series within the series, so to speak. And then
an
if the
East-West
top
showdown,
contenders, yeah, the top contenders of those come together for a final showdown. I feel like that might bring a little excitement too and
yeah,
help with traveling and feeling like you've got to go to every single one, because the way it's set up now, you almost have to
yeah,
accumulate points. If there's 8 races and okay, you got to have 4 minimum, 6 max. Well, everybody's going to want the max amount of points because that's what it's going to take to win your class.
yep,
So, yeah, it's not conducive for an ideal situation, I think, for any of us. And unfortunately, like I said before, with the quads not being ran exactly like the dirt bikes, we just don't have some of the options that they have.
yeah. Yeah, the promotion and the advertisement side of things absolutely 110 needs to be better. And like you said, I'm it's not that I'm trying to be negative about it. It's I'm trying to be helpful and enthusiastic and positive towards what it could be again. We need the same attention. We need the same promotions. We need the same sponsorships. We need to be able to do the same because just because those guys have the bigger sponsorships right now, they all get paid, to race, etc. Guys like Joel and Chad and all these guys, their skill level is just as good as Eli and Sexton and Jet and Deegan. Like, it's the only difference is those guys are riding on two wheels. Our guys ride on four. And to be honest, think it's hard to race in a quad. I mean, you go off a triple, you can't just throw that to correct like you can a dirt bike. You know what I mean? So, they're doing the same thing. They're still spending thousands of dollars, thousands of hours, all the thousands of miles. They're doing the same thing. Why can't we get them the same exact stuff? Broadcast these races on TV, have the same sponsors, Red Bull, Monster, all those big names. Get this sport to the same level because it doesn't just benefit us, it benefits all the sponsors at the same time. The advertisements, the gear, everything, all that attention is just going to bring more money to those sponsors to begin with, but it's going to help grow the sport. The potential is there 110%. So it's just a matter of us getting from A to B and see how big it gets. I mean, we
Oh
have to
yeah,
do it, and it's
yeah.
it's a shame that these guys don't get paid like the dirt bikes do, you know? And you're probably right. Joel's probably the only one that gets, to make an actual career out of the racing. I hope to see it grow. Even with just our D6 series, I want to do whatever I can to promote our series and make it grow and get more attention, gain more traction. Same with these pro events. I want them to just be, sky's the limit. It's possible. We just need the right people to be able to help get it there.
And it's, some people have touched on it on a few different occasions, and I'm always trying to listen and hear the important things that are out there. And back in the day, we had a series called the WPSA, and they came in for a short time. They ran a couple years and put on a hell of a show, an amazing event. And that was something that they went big. Since they had promoted snowmobiles, they had a connection with the ESPN2. So that was something that they had in their hip pocket that we're going to be televised. And they had a game plan and they knew what it needed to be. Lap times needed to be under 2 minutes. We need to do this. We need to do this. And they had
Hmm.
all these things in place, and they had a business plan. And the thing that really blew my mind, I was talking to the television people and some of the promoters, and what blew my mind was on a weekend for the WPSA, they tried to make it an event. They tried to give you options. So when
Right.
you showed up, you had the ATV motocross was going on. You also had the ATV, I think they called it like a quad cross, but it
Okay.
was kind of like GNCC racing. It was obstacles though. They had
Yep.
like telephone poles and rocks and tires and big mud holes, and they had different things like that,
Yep.
uh, that they incorporated into a course for them to do however many laps they came up with. And it was a challenge. And then they
Yeah.
also had the side by sides. So they
Okay.
put the side by sides out there on the track that we race and said, do the same thing, do whatever you want. We'll set up how many laps it's going to be and we'll go from there. So they had this whole organized event with multiple facets going on within
Right.
it. So, they obviously knew. The guy told me, he said, believe it or not, he said, I know you're into the motocross side of this, you love it, you breathe it, you want it all day long. He said, believe it or not, the quad cross, the quad challenge event carries the entire venue for
Really.
viewing, for money generated, everything brought in. And I said, how is that possible? That doesn't even make sense to me. And he said, think about it. He said, you've got any person sitting at home on a couch, whether they're in a double wide, whether they're in,
Mhm.
renting their house, own their house, whatever it is, wherever they're at, they're smart enough to look and say, okay, I can't spend $50,000 and build a side by side and do what they're doing. I don't have that ability.
Yep.
Or, okay, there's a motocross track. I can go get a quad and set it up like that. But chances are I'm not going to be able to do what those guys do. It's going to
Mhm.
take a long time to get there. But my four wheeler that's sitting back behind the shed with, four-wheel drive, I can go run through some
Yeah.
mud holes and go over some trees and make some trails. So
Yes, sir.
everybody could relate and they felt like they had the ability to do that at least at a small level.
Yeah.
So that's what got the interest and generated the television viewing, and a lot of what occurred throughout that year. The money was generated from that ATV challenge side,
Yeah.
which, like I said, it blew my mind, because I'm like, you got guys flying through the air. The best of the best came over to race that WPSA ATV
Hmm.
motocross side of things. And the tracks were huge. Like, they went big all the way around. It was an amazing event to see. To date, I mean, I think it was unrivaled, even with the tracks that we have today, that would be hard pressed to match. Just the sheer advertising and layout quality, and they had the big genie booms and the cameras up top, and the way
Hmm.
that the banner placement, everything, it was so professional, and looked amazing on TV. I mean, I'm sure you've seen YouTube videos and whatnot, and watched some of that from that '07 season, that we had the full season, and wow, absolutely crazy amazing.
Yeah. And we do have already big names in our sport. And I really think that if everybody came together to try to formulate a plan, we could make it all happen. We could get this sport to grow to where we all know it could be, and doing different things like that. I know it's been part of discussions, even just started with the pros, those weekend races, make them full weekend events, have separate things for everybody, have separate things for kids to do when they get bored of watching people race, have other events. I know, like, Bud's Creek, usually when we're down there, there's usually circle track going on at night, after the racing. We need to get other things as part of these national races to draw more attention to more people and broaden it a bit. Because once we get them in, we know they'll stay because there's going to be so many things to keep their attention. They're not going to want to leave. We're doing the same thing with our D6 series. We're actually just talking about, we always try and do events for the youngsters. And we were just talking about that. And I just brought it up that my suggestion this season is we need to go old school relay races, egg on the spoon, potato sacks, tied legs together. Like, we need to go old school because as well as I do, even like blue and gold days, they call it, around here for school when you're young. And all you do is fun activities towards the end of the year, going against each other. Kids love it. That's all we looked forward to was that day. You get to do tug of war and dodgeball and everything with everybody, not just your gym class. It's the whole school getting together. I think if we bring that same sort of element to our ATV races, that's going to help things too.
Yeah, and there's been different, I guess, things tried throughout the years. I know the West family and myself partnered up, and we tried to have the kids' fun day, and
Hmm.
try and put some things on, make sure that would have different events for each race weekend to help occupy the kids, and give them something to do, maybe give the parents a break a little bit, or uh, allow them an evening where, we were making popcorn and hot dogs,
Hmm.
like as fundraisers, just to give back to the kids.
Yeah.
It all went to the kids program, youth program, we
Hmm.
called it. And I really liked that. But being a part of it, I can tell you that behind the scenes, it's not all it's cracked up to be, because you don't get the support that you think you would. And
Yeah.
it's difficult. Like, there's a lot involved. And, although it can be huge and super successful, it takes a huge effort. And unfortunately, that was one of the downfalls there, that we kind of seen and experienced. Some people were willing to help.
Yeah.
Some people were willing to give from afar. They didn't want to be involved with it, though,
Yep.
which is fine. That's great. But it just kind of, for me, I thought it fell flat because we just didn't have the support to do what we would have liked to have done. And I think that
Yeah.
that comes from not the people not wanting it to be successful, or doing a small part. It was just the sheer numbers didn't and couldn't add up. to make it work. You know, if there wasn't a few of the bigger supporters that was driving it, which gave a lot, you know, very thankful for what they did behind the scenes. But had it not been for that, the program would have fell on its face, you know, almost from an inception, unfortunately. And like you said, you know, it could be a huge success. And I don't know how to, I guess, coin that and drive that with what is already going on at the events. Like there
Mhm.
almost has to be some streamlining of that to figure out how we can make all that work and have time for the different maybe age groups and segments
Mhm.
as possibilities for all of that to work.
Yeah.
That's
I
one
think
thing
we
that
really
would definitely
have
have to
an
be.
actual, just like, sorry to interrupt, but I didn't want to
Oh
lose my
no,
train
no.
of thought. Like an actual committee, of members for this specific part of the series, that their focus is solely on the ideas, the prep and running of the different events for different weekends. And that committee works in conjunction with the members that set up the actual race times and tracks and all of that, and kind of try to coordinate it, that way, or at least begin with something like that to see if a committee of actual, like, board members, so to speak, could make that part of it possible. It's very time consuming. That's the whole point
It
of the
is.
podcast here, is work-life balance. I
Yeah.
work full time, I have my son full time, I run my business, which I just expanded full time. It's a lot of work. And I know most of the community in motocross, they all have jobs. They don't just
Yeah.
do motocross and that's it. So, I mean, when it would come to, a committee or a board, so to speak, of members, we would have to focus that towards, people that have more free time, so to speak, to be able to concentrate on it, rather than just, kind of like a last minute, hey, we want to do a little kids event this weekend. Who can help in between races, sort of thing,
Right. Right.
leading into the whole work-life balance. So, you've been riding for years, you've been racing all different sorts of things. You obviously, have a normal person's job, just like the rest of us. How do you handle? I know you also have a business that you started a long time ago called Wheels Up. Tell us about that first before we get into how you handle your work-life balance.
Okay, Wheels Up started, we'll go all the way back to when street bikes again. We had a few local shops for performance parts and upgrades, and they weren't really helpful when it came to, there was a lot of us that were new to the sport, wanting to grow, younger guys, and it was a money pit kind of at the time that,
Mhm.
a lot of the guys seen opportunity as far as having the businesses, and they just were gouging. And we thought, you know what? We've all basically been around this our whole lives. We've got connections to the sport. We've got connections to motorsports. Between our group and our parents, a lot of us, our dads were motorheads, and it
Mhm.
was in your family, it was in your blood.
Yep.
So we started asking questions like, hey, can you help us figure this out? Or do you know how to do this? Can you show us? And maybe if you can show us, then we can pass that along. We can make a few bucks by having our friends or locals that want to get this stuff done come to us. And instead of going to the local shop and they're charging them $1,000, top rate for something that, with parts and labor and a fair price was half of that, we were like, we seen an opportunity there. And that's
Okay.
kind of where we band together and decided to try and do something to help each other out. And I was also in college at the time and doing a million things at once, as you do when you're young. And
Mhm.
I was going to school for business, so I knew the business side of things. And they were like, hey, can you figure this out? And we'll do the grunt work, and you do the office work to get this figured out, and we'll meet in the middle type thing.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I came up with a name and registered that and got things in place to run an actual business and have a storefront and establish a name for us and what we wanted to do. And I came up with Wheels Up because, we were riding wheelies everywhere and,
Mhm.
having a good time with that and enjoying our summers and just feeling the breeze in our hair and being young, enjoying
Yeah.
that aspect. So Wheels Up was fitting and coined it with that. We ran that business for, years, as long as we were all together and hanging out and into that aspect. Drag racing, like I said, we were drag racing at the local tracks and up in Cleveland and, back streets and whatnot, areas that were all shut down uh, for us to get in there and do that. Private events type of thing. But, we expanded and we grew and got to the point where the guys started getting out of the bikes and started having family lives and having kids and going their own
Mhm.
directions. And I had met Michelle and we decided that we were just getting started. I was really young, she was young, and we wanted to explore other avenues, so we decided that's when we were going to get into ATVs and go that route. So I said, well, I'm going to take the name with me and I'm going to keep building stuff. I'm going to keep, making machines and making motors and building things up for people. Enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Had a good time with it. I always seen a challenge in the aspect of making something reliable and
Mhm.
powerful. That's, our mutual friend, Ty Gaiman. That was one that, he had a Honda TRX and he couldn't last a weekend with it, the local races or at the nationals. I never forget. He grabbed me. We were at Etchicani, and he
Okay.
showed up, and he had a beautiful race bike and had a bunch of extra motors and all this stuff. And I remember he went out. I think it was practice, and he comes in. He's like, "My gosh, Brian," he goes, "I lost something in the motor. There's something went wrong." He said, "I got these other motors, so I got to swap them out. Can you help me?" And I said, "I've not worked on a TRX, but," I said, "I think, I'll figure it out. So you get on one side, I'll get on the other, and let's see what we can do." And I think we changed a motor in like less than 20 minutes. We had the bike
Gosh.
back together running, and he was back out on the track. So yeah, there are a lot of interesting stories. Michelle was taking a nap in the grass while we were changing the motor. That was good times.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where Wheels Up originated. Was I've always just kind of, I guess, inherited my dad's mechanical ability.
Mhm.
I wasn't really formally trained, but if I could take it apart, I could figure it out and put it back
Mhm.
together. So that
Yeah.
and that was a cheaper option than paying somebody. So
Man.
and all my friends, I had great friends that were, master mechanics and had done it for the majority of their lives. So I knew if I ever got in a pinch, all I'd do is make a call.
Hell yeah. I still do that. Perfect example. My brand new generator last season. Ran it first couple times. Everything was great. I get to the first friggin' race of the season, get to the first time with my camper. Now, yes, I've spent the night in it at my house to make sure things work and that sort of thing. But the very first race that I took it to, very first night, number one, I got there so late at night. It's starting to rain. My brand new generator will not start. And what do? I call the man that I always call, Dan Neville. I said, Dan, this friggin' thing won't start. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm going crazy here. Like, I can, I friggin' gave myself a huge knot on my leg trying to unhook my camper from the truck. And then that didn't work. And then I had the AC running and then it started leaking on me, and I woke up, half my bed was I'm like, "Oh my god," it's like but you know what? Just like you said, you can always phone a friend, and I I still do it all the time. Dan is I call him Dan the man for a reason. He helped me remodel again my camper, install some cabinets and do some electrical work. I mean, it's always good to have friends in in any aspect. So you know what? Dan, you help me out. You've got pictures all weekend of you and the kids. You just go, and barter and do what you got to do sometimes. But
Yeah.
it's always a fun time. I can't imagine ripping a motor apart though and having it back together in 20 minutes. I've seen some guys do it on with the minis, and all the dads, get together real quick in somebody's back of somebody's trailer and they're ripping that shit apart because in three more rounds, then their kids back up again and they're trying to finish it. So, it's a good time either way, that's for sure.
And just some more insight, I didn't tell this aspect of the story. I told you about how I started out with a 400EX.
Mhm.
Well, I sold that GSXR 1000. Obviously, that was worth a good penny. And since we didn't know anybody, I had been doing some research. And this is another big, huge portion of our story, Michelle and myself, was since I didn't know a lot about what I needed, I knew that for sure. And it
Mhm.
didn't seem like at the time everybody was super friendly, but nobody was really helpful when it came to, here's how to beat me, here's the recipe. You're not
Yeah.
going to get that.
No.
At least we didn't. At least we didn't. Um, especially if somebody sees possible potential there, or you already exhibit a little bit of speed or something. I came up with this plan, and at the time I had no idea if I was throwing darts in the dark or what was going on, but Cannondale had came out with their line of ATVs that were amazing, and it fit my wheelhouse where it scared everybody else away in the respect that I came from street bikes. So I was already into that mindset of I want to plug my computer into my bike's brain and be able to change everything
Mhm.
on my own right here, timing, spark, advance, whatever I can go in and do. My fuel spray, when things kick on, when they kick out, I was already into that. I was already familiar. I was already comfortable.
Mhm.
So when Cannondale was advertising what they were, and I seen, the dual injectors and the aluminum frames and all the computerized aspect of it, and I thought that just fits. That doesn't scare me where it scares a lot of people away. That makes sense. That's the evolution, that's like the next step. So I had bought a Cannondale Moto, and with me not having the background experience as far as knowing what I was going to have to build and then jumping into that and learning that machine, I picked it up pretty quickly. And I had a friend that he also, I can't even remember how, his name's Jason Farrar. I don't even remember how he came about, if it was friend of a friend or just we met him at the track, or where it came from.
Popped up on a
But anything's possible back in the day. I could have met him on the playground playing basketball, for all I know. But he had one, and what he brought to the table was that we connected just because of the bikes and similar mindsets, and great guy. But because I think he might have been the first one in the area to get one, made a contact with the local, not just was he a sales rep, but he was also a part of the R&D team back at the Bedford plant in Pennsylvania. And because he somehow got to know him, they collaborated on a lot of problems and things that was going on through the local shop.
Mhm.
So somehow when I made friends with him, I got the R&D guy, and the salesman came along with him. Ended up I inherited a friend out of that,
Nice.
which was phenomenal, because of the big piece of that story was this guy, his name was Steve Maslanik. He was working with guys like Tim Farr and John Natale at the Cannondale facility to
Okay.
develop the machines, and where this played into an advantage for me, where a lot of people were having problems with bikes, and they were always, I promise you, they were always very small problems. They
Mhm.
just didn't know it because they didn't have the information. We got all of that ahead of time. Like we would get updated parts, or service updates. Like he would literally just call, like, hey, we just found this
Nice.
problem on the production line, so go out to your bike and check this, and or read the number off and tell me what you have. And
Nice.
I'd read off what I had and what things look like, or take pictures and send back and forth. Okay, I got the new one right here, I'm sending it out tonight, you'll have it tomorrow. Like he
Nice.
took care of all that stuff.
Oh,
So we
yeah.
had a little bit of a inside foot in the door, when it came to the Cannondales, but we were the only ones. And as soon as I got mine and started figuring it out and realizing the advancements it had and the possibilities, I made sure that Michelle and I put our money together and we went and got one for her. So we were really known for a long time that we were on Cannondales, and there wasn't a lot of people, and
Mhm.
not a lot of people stuck with them, because some people would have problems and not have that inside information and know how to
Yeah.
resolve it, or maybe not have a shop that was good enough to stay on top of it with them,
Mhm.
and they would have problems and end up selling the machines, or not experiencing them to their potential,
Yeah.
where I felt like a lot of our success and our notoriety back in that time period came because we were different. We were on those Cannondales. They sounded different. They looked, but anyways, the Cannondales, that was something that really helped us separate us and make us stand out. And that was how I started the story with Mike Walsh. I met Mike Walsh at, I believe it was at High Point, because I had that moto and there wasn't a lot of motos out there, and mine was tricked out, and Mike came over, and I have a picture someplace. I got to see if I can find it, but Mike's, he's down on the ground looking at it with me, and you can see he's got his hand on his chin, and we were in deep conversation and really hashing it out and throwing it together. And that was about the time, I believe he had told me about the 250R kit that they made for that conversion of the Cannondales, because I
Yeah.
ended up getting those and putting them on the Cannondales too. So it was pretty interesting that it looked like a 250R, but it was a, twin spar aluminum framed ATV, no link
Mhm.
suspension, that was just a fire breathing dragon for us, the way they ran. I had all the GP control stuff that you could flip through different maps, and all the bells and whistles I had on ours. So they were something special. That was a machine that helped kind of bring us to the forefront of a lot of different scenes because we were different, and all the way through to the point of, I don't know if I probably told this story too many times. I can't even remember the last time how it came up, but Cannondale was sold. They had some problems and they ended up selling off the Cannondale ATV dirt bike division. And there was a company that had bought it, ATK, and then ATK ended up, I believe they were selling it or piecing it out and doing some different things with it. And around that time, because of my business, we had some friends I helped. I don't know if you know the company Blingstar that made front bumpers.
Okay.
Well, I had contacted Blingstar because I wanted a Blingstar front bumper for my Cannondale, and they didn't make them, and they didn't have the measurements. They didn't have any way to get a hold of one. I was talking to the guy, the head designer, Freddie, that was over there, and he said, "Hey," he said, "if can you draw?" And I said, "Yeah, I can draw like stick figures, bro. I'm not an artist. That's not me. Like, I'm the guy you make fun of for trying to draw." And he says, "Well, listen, this is what I need." And he told me what he needed and the measurements, and somehow, some way, I don't know how it happened. I had a momentary out of body experience. I'm not sure, but I actually drew like this drawing of a bumper from different dimensions, and I had all the measurements and the angles. And like I said, I don't know if it was an out of body experience or what had happened for that brief moment, but the creative juices somehow, for once in my life, came out of me on paper in a way that I've never been able to do. And I fax it over to him, and he's blown away. He was like, "Did you draw this?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Don't make fun of me." He goes, "No." He goes, "This is perfect. This is exactly what I need." So he made a bumper for the Cannondales from my drawing, and he sent me like 3 or 4 of them. He goes, I'm going to do some different things, and I want you to, I'm going to send these to you, and you take pictures and send them back to me, and number them and tell me which one's which, this and that. Okay. So I did it and adjusted some things and showed him what I did, and how I made up for what he did in a few spots. And he's like, "Okay, I'm going to send you like another box full next week." He goes, "We're good." I was
Nice.
like, "What do you mean?" I said, how much here? What's going on?" He's like, "No, we're good." He said, "Trust me, I did zero legwork and you did everything." So I got these Blingstar bumpers made for me, or for us, and which then he started producing the grab bars and the Nerf bars and all of that. And because of that relationship, then I started going to the Indianapolis dealer show that they had the
Oh,
power
okay.
sports and everything, which was a huge ordeal because, guys like Travis Pastrana and Jeremy McGrath and, Chad Reed, all the greats, they're going
Mhm.
there from all
Mhm.
disciplines of power sports. So going there, I met ATK was piecing out the Cannondales that were left to a company called Highlander. Highlander was going to take over, and this was going to be like their claim to fame. And somehow I was looking at this ATV and I was talking about it because obviously I helped Cannondale for the most part. We developed a lot of things. When we
Yeah.
had problems, we would talk to the factory and then we would go back and forth. And they would send us the updates and they would help us out and vice versa. So
Nice.
I was talking about some different things on the Cannondales and some of the problems I seen with what they were trying to do and what they could do to fix it. And the guy's like, hold on. He calls another guy over and we talked for, I don't know, an hour. And they end up telling us like, hey, we're getting together to go out to eat later. We want you to come. You know, you and your wife come to this and we want to take some notes and we want to get some things on paper with you. And I'm
Nice.
kind of like, okay, you know, that's cool. So we go out to eat and it ends up, I guess it was the owners of Highlander is who we were talking to. And I didn't know
Okay.
that. And we go through this dinner and have this, you know, great conversation and we're hashing out R&D stuff. And, you know, I'm just thinking I'm helping them because I've been on one so long. And at the end of the conversation, he's like, okay, well, I'm going to need your address, a couple specifics, like what we're going to be able to do for you and this and that. And I'm kind of like taken aback. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, we're sending you ATVs. You're racing for us. And I was like,
Nice.
but we're amateurs. Like I'm not a pro. I'm not, you know, I'm not that guy. And he's like, no, I don't care. He goes, we're going to send you a couple ATVs to start out with. And he goes, we'll get you some more after that initial shipment. He goes,
Oh
but you
yeah.
got to be on this four wheeler, on this quad, both of you. And I was like, wow, that's sick. You know, that was the first time I felt like, oh my gosh, I made it big. You know, like this was something I didn't even know was happening. I didn't know was in play, and felt amazing. Like we were so excited. We were riding, you know, the highest of highs at that point in time, and I was looking forward to that next season. You know, it was going to be amazing. I thought we were going to have, you know, like basically a factory ride. They're sending us these ATVs. We know all they want us to do is take notes and call them and give them updates and, you know, go back and forth with them to help them make a better product,
Yep.
which I was all about. And I had the background for that machine. I had, you know, taken them apart and put them back together a million times. I knew the motor that was in it. I knew the motor that they were talking about putting in it. And that was going great. And then how that story goes is it wasn't long after that, maybe a month or two, maybe three, but those owners, unfortunately, they were in a private plane. I think they were going back and forth checking out some desert racing or something. And their plane went down and they passed
Oh
away.
boy.
And that everything disappeared.
Yeah.
Everything with that whole deal and whole opportunity went away when that happened, and that was devastating. I
Yeah.
mean, on so many levels, because I like I said, I felt like, wow, you know, we had
Mhm.
always tried so hard and we put so much effort into it. And for me, I knew, you know, there's a million guys out there that race, and to be successful and to really make it is going to be damn near impossible
Yeah.
without having the opportunity to ride nonstop and the best equipment and things that were just, you know, we weren't born with a bunch of money and our families didn't have it. So, you know, we slowly built what we built.
Yeah.
And that was a brutal blow to think, man, finally I got an opportunity. Like I'm gonna take full advantage of this. And I knew Michelle was gonna be something because, you know, for her and a female in the sport, and she was a big jumper. Like that was the one thing. I wasn't super fast when I started, but I thought, well, if I can jump things, that's where I can save time. So I'll concentrate on being the test dummy that I'll jump things and then I'll go out and she can follow me after I figure it out. And then that'll be her aspect or strong point as well, that she can figure out the jumps. Now she just has to figure out the speed to go along with it and the
Yeah.
straightaways and the turns. So she was a big jumper, and that was a huge plus to help her out. And I thought she's really going to be something because once she puts it together and figures out how to go fast in turns and the straightaway speeds and the lines to choose, like it's all going to fall in place because most of the time the jumps is what held everybody back. And that she was completely backwards when it came to that. The jumps was her strong point. So I made sure of that. But just a behind the scenes story. I don't know that I've really told that story to too many people. I always kept that one kind of close because it was such a high and such a low at the same time,
Mhm.
you know, to
Yeah.
experience that and to have such a near missed opportunity. It was so close, and
It's like the
that could have
commercial
really been
nowadays with the
something.
fishing pole and that whole dude with the dollar. It's got to be quicker than that.
And that's what it felt like. I don't mean to be insensitive, it was
Yeah,
a horrible accident for the owners, both owners to be on the plane and for that to
yeah,
happen. It was horrible. But I felt like, I put in the work and everything was in place to be
hmm,
very successful and for to make it over that hump, so
yeah,
to speak,
yeah,
to have something go in a direction that I could finally relax a little bit to say, okay, I can use my money to train or to a different aspect than putting it all on the bike. I finally
yeah,
have means to do something more than, trying to do everything a lot of times makes all the little things that much harder. And that
yeah,
was one of those I felt like that weight had been lifted and I felt okay if all the bikes come and they send us two bikes a piece at the very least, we got a practice bike and a race bike, like
yeah,
that takes
and
away so much of my, throughout the week work
yeah,
because, you were talking about work life balance with the Cannondales. That's one thing I will say. It kept me very strictly regulated and disciplined that when we got home from a race weekend, that we raced, believe it or not, with that local series when we first started, we raced Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We raced
damn,
every day, different track. Yeah, we drove through the night a
damn,
lot of times to get to another track. That first year in '03, I want to say Michelle raced like 59 times that that season. 59
damn.
times. And I was like 52. I had a couple times I
Jeez.
had to work and a couple things that pulled me out of it that I didn't get to. Uh, but so I was very disciplined that when I got home, the bikes had to get washed right away, and then you had to go over every bolt because they were
Yes.
aluminum and put together with steel bolts. They all wanted to come out. They all wanted to vibrate loose. It didn't matter unless you used sleeve locker. It
Hmm.
was not staying in. It wanted to come out. Red Loctite didn't matter. Red Loctite was like yellow Loctite. You could put it in with your fingers. It was that bad. So it made me very disciplined. And I thought that's what it was all about. I thought that that's how hard you worked all through the week to go racing. It wasn't until we got a Suzuki and it would have been '07. I got a Suzuki to start R&Ding it so we could make a transition because we started having some parts that were getting hard to find for the Cannondales. And when I got that first Suzuki, I'll never forget, I went and rode it and I came home, I washed it and I looked at it. I changed the air filter, I put gas in it, and everything was tight. I didn't know what to do with all my time. And I thought, this is amazing. If this is what having a Suzuki's like, let's go buy them now because I've got 4 days now free. I'm done on
Right?
Monday. I got
Oh yeah,
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday wide open and then go race Friday.
yeah.
So
Right?
yeah, that was an eye opener to say the least to transition from something that literally took me all week to go over her bike and my bike to be able to race the next weekend. And the Suzuki was clean the air filter, fill it back up with gas, and you're done.
Yeah.
That was wild.
Yeah, it's quite a difference, that's for sure, between manufacturers and that sort of stuff. You know, it's interesting, frustrating, and pleasing at the same time to see differences, between manufacturers with stuff like that, for sure. Now, we can't end this podcast without talking more about Michelle. Tell us more about her. Tell us more about, the time you had together, the racing, everything. Give us more about Michelle, because I know there's a lot
Okay.
of people that are gonna watch this that don't know much about her. I
Yeah.
certainly didn't know anything about her until I started seeing her wings, on different bikes, and people would mention the name Michelle. So, let's hear some more about Michelle.
You got it. So, Michelle, I can start by telling you this. When we got that first 400EX, we had come from the street and I was riding wheelies and stuff. And that was one of the first things, I go out on this 400EX and I'm doing wheelies everywhere and I'm standing on the seat and, feet over the handlebars. She says, I want to learn how to do that. So,
Oh, yeah.
really? Yeah, I want to learn how to do that. Show me how to do that. I said, okay, jump on. She kind of looked at me funny. I said, I'm going to do a wheelie with you on it first so that you can feel the balance point and feel what that feels like to teeter back and forth. And I'm going to
Mhm.
show you to hit the brake. And, 400EXs, you could start from a dead stop to a wheelie with the torque they had and walk it along type thing. So I showed her how to do a wheelie. She had it immediately. Immediately. It was crazy. Her coordination came along with that really good. And she's riding wheelies completely across the field that we were working on it in. That moment, like literally 3 tries later, already
Nice.
got it figured out. She took to that, loved it. She absolutely loved it. I had told you she was a police officer, and that was something that she was very passionate about. She had more certifications and training and background as a newcomer in her department than
Mhm.
anybody else had. She
Yeah.
took it very serious. She was going to make a huge career out of it. Like everybody loved her. She couldn't do any wrong. The whole community called her hot cop. They liked her. Michelle was the hot cop. So she was going to do that, and like I said, we got into racing and dabbling, and she always had to work the weekends, and I got her to take one weekend off or something. I can't remember what it was, and we ended up going racing, and we raced all weekend long. And I'll never forget, at the end of that weekend, she was like, "We could do this every weekend like this all the time." And I was like, "Yeah." And I remember she thought about that for a few days, and she came back and she said, "I think I'm going to find another job." She goes, "I want to do this, and if they won't let me off, I'm going to have to probably change my jobs or go to a different precinct or area." And
Hmm.
I said, "Okay, well, think about it. I know you've got years where you're at and all that." But she absolutely loved racing. And I told you that I took Wheels Up with me. That was my business background. So she came to me once we started going to the nationals. And when we first started going to the nationals, it was crazy that it was a little bit more advanced back then, in the respect that they had the women's pro-am, they called it. It wasn't women's pro,
Right.
but they did have the pro-am, and then they had like women's BC. So they had two different classes that the girls could go to.
Okay.
So Michelle got to see Angela Moore, Angela Butler, whatever you want to last name you want to coin her with. And what was it? There was Cindy Hart and Jamie Lou Berg, and back then Heather Rose. There was Michelle Natali. All these girls, Susan. What was her name? Susan Parker. But there was a very fast group of girls that went big and rode like guys, like they were
Okay.
fast. And Michelle got to see that as a newcomer, and that's what she was like, "Man, I want to aspire to be to that level and race with them and do that." She always had a way with the kids too, and I think it might have been because of her cop background that she had, and community and being around and working like the football games and basketball games. She was
Mhm.
always interacting, and so people took to her naturally. And she had a goofy laugh and a different voice, raspy voice with that long blonde hair. So she stood out.
Mhm.
And when she started racing, even locally, she was very successful right away because there wasn't a lot of women. And then she was very passionate about it. So she was very successful right away, that, she was always top three.
Mhm.
So the younger girls and the younger boys, would see her. And because she raced women's class, a lot of times women's class would be staggered with like a blaster class, or one of the classes that there would be kids in or younger people in, and they just looked up to her. They'd come find her after the race and talk to her and want her to sign things and everything else. It was really cute, very heartwarming. So she told me, she said, "Listen, I want to do something to promote the girls. So, I'm going to get something to get more presence and maybe more sponsors out there, especially when they did away with the women's pro-am at some point." And Michelle always felt like that was horrible, that she wanted that back because there was payouts. It was like the guys plus
Okay.
25 class. When you race, there was payouts according to how big the class was.
Oh, okay.
And she, wanted to promote that and get that back, and give the women some prestige,
Yeah.
that they very well deserve. So I said, "Okay, well, I've got Wheels Up." I said, "Since I already have that name, we can use that name and coin something off of it. What about Wheels Up Girls?" She's like, "I love it." I said, "Okay." And Wheels Up was spelled with a Z. So she's like,
Mhm.
"I'm going to spell girls with a Z." Okay. Locally, we got to know people, and HMF, local exhaust manufacturer, Hans. We got to know Hans from the dealer show that I was talking about, like
Okay.
Hauser Racing. There was another Ohio company. We got to know them, and Cometic Gasket, and a lot of the local stuff, Weisco. And Michelle would ask these people. She would get contacts when we were at the dealer show, And because she was a great personality, like I said, they loved her. They talked to her. They give her, product and Bell helmets. I mean, I think the one year she left there with like 4 or 5 brand new helmets. They're like,
Oh,
you
jeez.
gotta use our helmets. We want you to be using our product every time you go to the track. You got to have our stuff. They just give her whatever she wanted. Point at what you like, you can have it. And
Oh,
she
yeah.
got it. So she rounded up these sponsors, and because she wanted to do a poster. She
Okay.
decided that she was going to go and she was going to get real local girl riders, whether dirt bikes, ATVs, young and old. She's going to make a poster that she's going to promote them, and the sponsors are going to pay for it. The money she gathers from them will pay for the print, and she's going to give them away, and that's going to advertise for all of them. Well, the sponsors absolutely loved it. They were all on board. So they helped her every year, and she got Wheels Up Girls going, where she was promoting women's racing and promoting the women's side of things and wanting it to grow, and she was trying to also get the women together to I kind of feel like, I'm not trying to steal anybody's thunder, but I feel it was a precursor to like they have the women's promotional, what do they call that now, where they have mentoring, where they have like
Okay.
a pro rider at each round will go, and they'll have girls that like put in for this. And I know Michelle was working with Andrea Berger at the time and Neve Shaw. They were coming up with that plan that they wanted to interact to bring the up and coming girls along and show them, the behind the scenes and camaraderie, and help them so that they felt special and cared for, like they were getting a pro experience at the
Nice.
racetrack. And that was one of the things that Michelle was trying to push and trying to bring more to the sport. As a matter of fact, we had a local team, Beckery Racing, great family, and they help with some things now and again. I'll never forget Redbud the one year. There was a huge autograph signing. I can't remember if that was like when they had the KTM rigs there, but I know there was like a special event. There was a ton of people there that year, and they specifically came and got Michelle to be a part of the pro autograph signing with the guys,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they pulled her in because there was so many questions and people asking where she was and wanting her there. She was the only woman, the only girl that was pulled into that. And if I'm not mistaken, that was like the very first time that a woman was included with the autograph session. And he took the Wheels Up Girls posters and was signing them. And then all weekend long, we had people at our pits coming over to get these posters and get her to sign them.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, that was pretty big, and that was wild. But she started doing that every year, where she was doing the promotion with the Wheels Up Girls posters. She would have some of the girls come to like Breezewood Proving Grounds. They had
Mhm.
some of the girls show up, and they were trophy girls that they would get their pictures taken with
Nice.
everybody and make sure that everybody that got on the podium could come up and get their pictures taken with them, and get an autograph, whatever they needed. Like, and they were all dedicated, that Michelle made sure that when she chose somebody or she worked with somebody, that they understood, like, you're there for the long haul. Like, we don't want one single kid to leave without getting an autograph or a picture if he wanted it. Like, you've got to be invested and there because you enjoy it, and you want
Yeah.
everybody else to get out of it that same type of feeling. Everybody wants to feel special. And she was behind that. She embodied that. And everybody, like I said, knew her laugh. They knew her voice. She was a goofy, kind of funny, and made
Okay.
things fun, and had that personality and that character. And she was tenacious on the track. If there was one thing that I could have changed, was Michelle should have won the WMX championship probably 3 different occasions, but she got hurt. She'd always come up a point or two short, and because she got hurt or something happened, and just weird circumstances. Now, she did win the women's championship on other levels at the WPSA, the women's class, and at one time they had plus 25, and then I think they changed it to like plus 30 or plus 35. Multiple track champion and women's champion all over the place. But if there was one thing I could have changed, I would have definitely held her back or made sure that she concentrated more on the series at times. We had so much going on sometimes. Like she'd get hurt at a local series, and then
Mm,
it would affect her at the national, and
yeah.
that she'd have to sit down or something would happen. I mean, there was one time at Spring Creek, Minnesota, she had got up one night and apparently something had happened. She had some weird iron deficiency or something. Something happened with her blood was real weird one night, and she fell and she stuck her hand through a window and
Oh,
it cut her. She had like, I don't know, 100 stitches. It was crazy. It cut into
dang.
her arm. There was this, big nasty cut. And I remember Spring Creek was that weekend. We go there. She had me wrap it with gauze and duct tape, and she went out and raced and
Duct
won
tape
the.
fixes everything.
I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, but that was just how she was. She was tenacious. She was just unrelenting when it came to when time to ride. She wanted to ride. She wanted to be a part of it. She loved it. She welcomed the challenge. She wanted to be there. She was all about promoting not just the women's class from a pro side, but all the way through the ranks, from the young girls all the way through. And she absolutely loved them and loved that when somebody would approach her and ask for something to be signed or, want a sticker, a poster or something, she was all about that. So she embodied the ATV spirit whole and completely. We were all hard workers, never given anything type of thing. And she wanted to make it bigger. She wanted to make it better. She wanted the notoriety for the girls. She wanted them to be held at the same level as like what the pro guys were. She wanted more laps. She wanted a set time to run, like all those things that they get. She felt like if we can showcase our abilities and we start doing things at the level
Hmm.
kind of like what they are now,
Yeah.
what Kinsey was doing, what Emma was doing, what Shelby is doing, all these girls that have stepped it up, Tegan, India, all of them that are out there and stepping it up every time they set foot on the track. It's where it's at. And that was what she was pushing. That's what she wanted. She said, if we can show them that we've got that skill and that level, if we're jumping and we're taking the jumps and we're taking obstacles that they are. We're trying, we're training, we're putting in the work and it shows. It'll
Yeah.
come.
Hell
And
yeah.
she was working towards that, and she was a big innovator for the women when it came to that to get to that level. She wanted that, and she was willing to do what it took, put in the work. She was striving for that, and that's why I think she was trying to band the women together to bring them all along. I felt like she knew that it wasn't going to be just one person going out there and walking away with it that was going to bring everybody to the fences. It had to be a race. Like they
Yeah.
had to elevate each other and
Yeah.
make it to the point where it was exciting and it was invigorating to come to the track to know that one of these five girls, depending upon the start or depending upon a certain jump or, what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
that was the excitement she was trying to bring. And she knew that. Like she was ahead of her time when it came to that aspect, and she knew what she was after. She was just trying to get everybody on the same page as her and bring them along.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure
so
she's
yeah, so
proud of
that
where these girls are at right now. That's watching it. It was like Emma last year watching her, and not that I didn't pay attention to the women's class, but I really focused on watching Emma at what track was that? Tomahawk. Did a bunch of photos for her, but I was really paying attention. She is so fast. So Tomahawk, just like the rest of us. By the time the gate dropped, and I was positioned there to watch the beginning, I would walk 50 yards up and she'd already gone up that big hill, down and around, and already. I'm like, holy hell! Like you are so damn. Like this is not easy catching up, trying to take pictures, even just walking. Like I'm sure Michelle would be really proud of where these girls are right now and how much they've all stepped up these last several years and really elevated their skill levels to be literally as good, if not better, than the guys. They definitely deserve everything that the guys get for the pro class. It should be the same exact thing for the women. They've elevated it a lot. And I've noticed that even just being in it the last few years myself.
yeah, you can see it at the track because not just the jumps that they've stepped up. I mean, you could name quite a few of the tracks and put it out there. Kinsey, Emma, like I said, Shelby, Tegan, those girls really started jumping a lot of the bigger obstacles, like
Hmm.
the Holy Pistoli I seen. And you said you were at Pleasure. Well, you would have seen Emma stepped up and did the uphill triple
Yep.
that I was like, wow, I was really impressed with that.
Hell yeah.
That jump that claimed some axles and, a few riders. And
Yeah.
she blasted that, and I thought that's cool. And then Iron Man, they did the big jump in the center,
Yeah.
which I was blown away. I didn't expect that from either one of them. Not that I felt they couldn't do it. I just felt like that was a risk that I didn't know if they'd be willing to take.
Hmm.
And both of them sent it. And I thought,
Yeah.
wow, okay,
Go
they
big or
brought
go
their
home.
game faces today, and they definitely did. Um, they've elevated their game, they've elevated their training, their conditioning. In all aspects, they've improved as a whole group.
Fine.
We've all seen it, we've all taken notice. And I like the fact that they're involved so much more too. Like now that, they have their autograph signing,
Hmm.
and they've got posters themselves and stickers. I'm happy to see that because I know, once again, we don't all have sponsors that pay for all that.
Hmm.
Probably their families are funding that, and that's coming from personal monies to make that happen. So I just hope that everybody appreciates that and appreciates what is put into being there and doing what they do. I've in memory of Michelle and in her name and recognition, I started doing the whole shots for the women's class that I do. Both whole shots each race weekend, and it's always, originally I started it, had some sponsors help me out, but it was all me. And then after that, I kind of decided that I'm not going to be able to do this myself, and I've had sponsors step up and have asked for help to make that keep happening. And it was such a success, and so many great people wanted to help have their name associated with it, because I always give recognition. This whole
Hmm.
shot is sponsored by this family or this sponsor or whoever they want me to name. But it grew to the point where I started doing the Pro-Am class as well,
Okay.
doing the whole shot awards. Same thing, by sponsors that graciously stepped up and helped out in Michelle's name and memory, to keep that alive and reward those riders for their whole shots. And there was even times that people would walk up at the track and give me money to do it. So I'd throw out whatever classes they wanted. Sometimes the 250 All-Star class
Hmm.
got some whole shot awards, and sometimes the women's class, the younger class, got some whole shot awards or recognition, different things where they were like, hey, just throw out one of your, wild awards that, biggest mover, I like to call it. So like if somebody got a bad start, but passed six people during the course
Yeah.
of the race, they got that
Hell
they
yeah.
got awarded money, something like that, in recognition. So I love to be able to do that and see that happen for everybody. I wish I could do that for every class. I wish I could do
Yeah.
that for everybody out there, to be able to make them feel special and feel like they were noticed and had something to give them in recognition of that. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot that came from Michelle's legendary memory. So we continuing forward, I'll be doing that again this year, and hope to continue it as long as everybody keeps helping out. And,
Yep.
we try to grow the sport and keep it alive and make it bigger and better. So that's the driving force behind it all.
Yeah. Legendary. That is the perfect word to describe not just her, but you as well. That's what you
I don't
guys.
know if I've I don't know if I've earned that yet. I'm trying awful hard, but those are some big shoes to fill. So I keep clawing away, and that's my driving force. And yeah, puts a smile on my face to know that she's watching that happen. I wish obviously that she could be here and be a part of it, but I feel like for the situation how it is, for her to know that she's associated with it, she got to see that happen and her name associated with it. I feel like should be pretty proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. She's definitely watching and smiling down, and she's definitely proud, not just you and what you've, accomplished and continue doing, but like I said, for these girls to really elevate and step it up and that sort of stuff. She's definitely smiling, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So before we wrap it up, I won't keep you too much longer. Let's end it on the note of what are your keys to a good work life balance? How have you handled it from start to finish? Where do you think you've made mistakes? Or what advice would you give these younger folk starting to come up through the ranks that are working away, running businesses, going to school, starting families? What do you think are the keys to being successful?
Ooh. That's going to be a tough one. Talk about putting you on the spot. I don't even know if I consider myself a success when it comes to that. You know, we all want to be rich and famous, and we want our essentially a hobby that's our job to be able to pay for everything in
Yep.
our life would be ideal. You know, so that you're happy with what you do and happy with what it affords you in life. Then because of it.
Hmm.
You know, all I can say is for me, what I've always tried to do is I've tried to balance as much as possible, you know, a regular job with my extracurricular jobs and activities in a way that I don't let the job that I rely on and fall back on to pay for everything or to make things happen. I try not to put that at risk too often as far as, you know, stretching your hours or putting
Hmm.
yourself in a situation where, you know, you have to choose, so to speak. You know, I try to give myself as many ounces as possible just
Hmm.
by planning ahead and also being realistic. That it
Yeah.
comes down to having that, you know, you always have hopes and dreams and how you hope things will go, but then you have to have the realistic side of, okay, more than likely, this is really what's going to happen. This is what it's going to take, you know, whether it's money wise, time wise, have a good balance, be realistic with yourself. There's
Hmm.
no sense in trying to talk yourself into something that you know isn't true or going to happen.
Hmm.
Just be realistic with the
Yeah.
expectations and where you're trying to go. Now, I'm not saying that that should hold you back, or if you feel super strongly about something that you want to do or something that you want to try, then that means you got to risk it because
Yeah.
a lot of times those payoffs and dividends are well worth it in the end, especially when you're young. When you're
Yeah.
young and you can make mistakes and start over and,
Hmm.
you know, try again, that's when you want to put in the hours, work all the overtime. Unfortunately, sometimes you got to put some of the fun aside or relationships aside when you're young like that for the benefit to be further down the road.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one thing that I could definitely say is a solid tip is concentrate more on yourself and figuring things out for your future when you're young, because then it'll pay off as you do figure those things out and narrow your focus, figuring out what you like and which direction to go as you get older. And be truthful and honest with yourself. You know, my
Yeah.
dad was an amazing individual, a World War II veteran. You know, he was one of the guys that lived through the Great Depression. Unfortunately, he had to drop out of school early because that just wasn't something that was in his life that he was able to pick and choose and do the things that we've all been coddled with, so to speak. You
Mm.
know, he lied about his age to join the military to be on a boat just to get 3 meals a day.
Damn.
Now, how many people would do that to fight in a war, to fight in a war,
Yeah.
you know, at 15, 16 years old and feel like that was his best option? You know, that to think about that's pretty rough to come up in an era like that.
Like,
But I looked up to that guy. He was very, very intelligent despite his lack of formal education. Like I said, he could take anything apart and put it back together and make it better and improve upon it, which
hell
blew
yeah.
my mind, you know. So, but live in a manner that you can be proud of, you know, honesty, integrity. There's a lot of things that by today's standards aren't there. Common sense, it's not common anymore. So, so,
Phew. That's a whole
so
nother
be
podcast. We
educated.
won't go there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But, and that's the point I'm making, you know, educate yourself, be mindful of your surroundings and how others feel. And also, throw a little caution to understand at times that you don't know everything, and afford some people some patience and love sometimes because you don't know their struggles or what they've been through.
Amen.
So, there's a little humility that needs to be given sometimes as well. So, I mean, if you can make sense of any and all of that, I guess that's my organized chaos of thoughts of trying to be successful, a good person, intelligent, and mindful of where you're going and what you want to be and what you want to do. Because, at the end of the day, just like we're talking here about, Michelle, and hopefully some day, if I do well enough, some sort of legacy or the way I'm talked about, I would like that to be in a manner that, people afford compliments and say, there's not going to be another one like that in a good way.
Yeah.
And that's my goals, my way of thinking and my way of life, because I feel that way. I feel like, when I'm gone, there's going to be a lot of aspects in how I was brought up and the thought process and mentality that's probably gone with me.
Yeah.
And I just feel like as a society, there's a lot of that going to happen. A lot's going to be lost.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, Brian, I truly appreciate the time of you talking to us about your life, your career, your beautiful wife, Michelle. But it is time to say goodnight, and we'll talk to you soon again. I'm sure. Catch up with you during the season, see how you've been making out.
Question: what episode is this going to be?
5. Was that an official question? Oh, ha! There you go. Yes, there you go. Number 5. Didn't even
I
think
was
about
curious.
it. Man, see, things happen for a reason.
I was thinking
man.
about it because I swore that I seen that Ties was number 4, I thought. And I was like, does he know, or is this a coincidence, or did he film somebody in between, or is this number 5? So I didn't mean to throw it out there, but I also wanted to know for my own personal being, because that couldn't have happened any better.
I didn't even think about that, to be honest. And you know what? Like we were talking about earlier, hey, things happen for a reason, and that is perfect. Episode number 5, Brian and Michelle Jenkins.
Couldn't have happened any better. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I've had a great time talking and getting to know you guys. Have yourself a good night, Brian.
Thank you so much. Very nice talking to you, and very nice meeting you.
Awesome. This is Life is Fast. Why ride slow? Have a good night, everybody.